Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Interstellar Quest. We are still en route to visit distant worlds, but before that we gotta master our own solar system and see what kind of discoveries we can make over there. And with that in mind, we're launching off Wayfinder B2. And Wayfinder B2, well, it's the second generation in the Wayfinder class, and with the first generation could still be launched on a trusted Vulcan Heavy. We are going to need a little bit more powerful rocket today. And that's because we're going to need a Delta V. We're going to need a Delta V to not only get there, but also get in orbit and land, because we are going to a more high velocity target, which is Eve. And we're actually going to use the second stage. We built a light craft. So this craft is, like, the launcher is capable of putting something like 20 tons into orbit, and this craft is only a couple of tons. So we can use the second stage for not only the transfer towards Eve, but also the capture, as we will see later on in the episode. Because we got a couple more Atlas launches for you. Note the heat shield in the B variant, very important. The C variant is doing something similar, but this is a very, very important launch. For those of you who have watched the roadmap episode and studied that, notice that one of the key things in the first phase of our playthrough is, wow, those clouds. Blackrack, you're a wizard. Anyway, the most important phase feat of the first phase of our roadmap is to start using nuclear engines. Why nuclear engines? It's because phase 2 requires fast transits into the Jool system, which is what this craft is going to be a prototype for. So the C4 Wayfinder has a nuclear engine on the back. It's got aspergeous staging, meaning we will draw fuel from two of the tanks, then jettison those two, then draw them from the next two, and then from the next two. Always maximizing what we do, but we're dipping into the atmosphere. I put my apoapsis quite low, it's kind of hard to see, and I'm just in time retracting my heat shield, making sure we burn through the atmosphere. You can see me here checking if the fuel has been sufficiently drained. There are the two tanks, obviously hard to see in the dark side of the planet. But we're making it through, dipping into something like 63 kilometers before exiting the atmosphere again. It's a long burn. I don't have a huge thrust to weight ratio on this engine, but good enough. And we've got something like 10 kilometers of Delta V, which should enable us to explore the moons of Jool. Here we are back into the sunlight. We have expanded our science instruments arms, which have been put out there with all kinds of robotics that we are starting to use. You can see we ditched two of the tanks, plenty of Delta V left, and the craft is off to the vastness of Jool. And as we were doing that, I saw the Elloo window was coming up, and so I copy-pasted the craft and added a RTG, so a radioactive thermonuclear generator, and I should have shifted in there somewhere, I don't remember where. It's probably not enough, but it will be enough to recharge the batteries. So when it will arrive at Elloo, it's probably going to struggle with electricity, but my thinking is that it will do a little bit of science, recharge the batteries, transmit it, recharge the batteries, etc, etc, etc. Rather than making the craft super heavy with a lot of additional solar panels or switching to fusion generators. So we're not there yet, but I think we can make do with what we have. Here is the Trans-Ellooian, I don't know how to call that, the Trans-Elloo insertion burn. And unfortunately we can do quite a bit with the transit stage, which has a ton of fuel left, and we came in a little bit higher. Here we go, we've burned through that, and we're switching to our infrared telescope. Well, I did some image post-processing, but we'll imagine it's our infrared telescope. We want to see what is actually happening, and you can see the engine starting to glow as it's building up this extremely high temperature. So we're in a normal rocket, well, like in a chemical rocket engines, two materials combine in a kind of explosion to generate heat and exhaust gas. A nuclear engine works slightly different. It uses a nuclear engine to heat up, in our case hydrogen, to extremely high temperatures. and then that's pushed out of the exhaust. So that's why it's glowing. It takes some time to get up to speed. It also takes some time to cool down again. But you can see we are quite some distance from Kerbin when we finish our burn. But enough delta V relays for mid-course corrections. And I'm not sure why it's wiggling all about right now. Probably trying to orient its solar panels. Regardless, we'll see it back in about 3.5 years. Meanwhile, the first iteration of the Wayfinders, the B1, is arriving at Dres. And note this, well, you can't really see it in this image, but Dres seems to have now a really nice ring around it. I lost the footage of the insertion burn, but hey, we got there. We're deploying our relay satellites. Yes, the Wayfinder class has 3 micro CubeSats that get deployed, and then we wait for about a week for them to naturally drift through the orbit and create a relay network. And we start doing our science using all the sensors and start mapping the planet. So this is going to take time anyway. And as we do this, these small relay satellites will create a communication network around the planets. And so we're about 2 weeks later, and we are ready for the main brunt of the mission. We're going to deploy the whole lander, or we're going to get rid of the main orbiter. The main orbiter will stay in orbit around Dres, function as the main relay satellite, connecting to the smaller relay sats and giving us a stable network as we descend down to the planet. This lander has plenty of delta V. It's got something like 800 meters per second or 1,000. It's more than enough to go down there, land in Dres, and then even make a small hub, as we will see in a minute. Because I sort of misjudged the terrain. I should have put up an inclination scanner, but then again, the ScanSat satellites are not that precise, and my landing skills are not that precise. So I was hoping to aim for an area on the top of that ridge, and then the MacJab computer decided that it was going to land somewhere on the slope, and I'm sort of panicking, trying to figure out, are we going to land on a flat piece of land? And then I said, well, let's just have the landing computer handle it and see what happens. We can always refer to a quick save, but it turned out pretty good. I thought it was going to land on this nice flat little ridge over there, but it didn't. So it ran out of horizontal velocity, and it's now going into a vertical descent mode. Engines are tuned in. 3 little twitch engines provide more than enough thrust for us to work it out. This is where we're going to land. It looks okay, but then I saw the slope. Look at all the dust blowing off. However, the lander is very stable. But I don't want to deploy my rover here. So after a little bit of thought, the Kerbals decide that we have so much fuel left, we can actually make a small hop back into space. Obviously, this is sped up 6 times or something like that. We make a couple of maneuvers until we find the right spot, which is on top of the ridge between the Midlands, the Lowlands, and the lower plateau. So there's 3 biomes very close by, but at quite an inclination. If we pick our trajectory right, we should be able to get there. We are deploying the lander. And again, we are using robotics to clip those wheels around, collect them, lock them into place. These are the mountain goat wheels from the Wild Blues rover Buffalo set. They're pretty powerful. And then we can deploy our antenna. Up until now, we've been using the relay satellites, but with this little dish, we can also connect to Kerbin directly. And I may have to invert some of the engines and the steering controls before we actually start on a larger drive. Here you can see me looking at the ScanSat maps that we just have made to figure out what biomes are nearby, and you can see there's 3 biomes in our vicinity if we travel in the right direction, which will turn out to be a problem because the inclination is pretty steep. So if we pull on the brakes, we sort of glide down the mountains like a snowboarder. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. You can see we used some of the goo containers already. And we're sort of making our way down. I'm struggling with the wheels. And we glide down another slope until we reach a nice flat piece of land. This took a long time. This was like an hour of me gliding down, finding the right spot, driving a little bit to the next ridge, braking to make sure we don't fall off the edge. Yeah. There we are. That's the edge of the highlands part where we are going down into the crater to the lower plateaus. And the rover is pretty stable. Even if you bounce over a couple of sturdy rocks, it will always put itself in a stable configuration. Here we go again, snowboarding down to an interesting service feature I saw. And I have breaking grounds installed, so there's other service features. In the top right you can see it sticks up like kind of a finger, which turned out not to be an official service feature, just some cool parallax stuff. I did spend a long time looking for service features and scanning that. But the rover can do that. Here you can see us gathering more science from the goo containers. We have arrived at a different biome. And we're going to figure out what everything brings. We got a magnetometer, which I thought it would work on services, but apparently it doesn't do that anymore. But it's a nice instrument to have on your rover. And this is the service feature I thought was the service feature, but it turned out to be something else. This is a meteorite. That was the one I should have been looking for. And I'm now sliding down towards it, making sure we hit it unintentionally. But this is a nice place to park our craft and then deploy our sensor arm to make interesting observations, drilling a piece out of the rock and seeing what kind of vapors come out of the meteorite and send all that stuff back to Kerbin for science. Here we go. And as we leave this rover on Mars, it's time to turn our attention to Wayfinder B2. So yeah, if you haven't guessed, this is the Wayfinder episode. I put all the footage together, and so you get a lot of Wayfinder and rover stuff this episode. We have arrived at Eve, a mysterious planet. Up until now, we have not been able to visit it. We've looked at it through our telescope and noticed interesting stuff happening in the atmosphere, stuff we cannot really explain through normal means. So we just had to go there. We do know the atmosphere is quite thick. So we need some more data. We need biome data, and we need pressure data. And we think we've designed this craft well enough to land on the planet. But will it survive the service? That is a question I have. Or will it survive the re-entry? Look at that sunset. Beautiful. Yeah, similar procedure to what you saw happening around Dres. We are deploying our relay satellites. You can see me figure out if the staging is correct. Always check your staging. We are about to send them off. There they go. 3 tiny relay satellites that will start at the beginning of our orbital network. And we're shifting the map away from Kerbin to Eve to see that our sensors are working properly and we can start mapping the biomes. The low accuracy altimetry measurement instrument is on board, and we're also using for slopes. And I think we do resource scans as well, which could be helpful if we ever want to build a craft that takes off from Eve, because that's really expensive. Well, we deployed our main relay satellite and we are going in for a landing, and we picked a spot at the poles, again close to a couple of reasons. And at some point MacJeb said, no, you're going to land in the ocean. And the Scansat map was like, no, you're going to land on the poles. And I trusted Scansat, which is something I should not have done. That was the structural part sitting on top of the heat shield, which exploded. Or the docking node. I think this one's going to go in a second. And the question is, will the heat shield hold? I didn't fill her completely up with a ablator, because a ablator is kind of overpowered. But Eve is a harsh mistress. The air pressure is something like 10 times that of Kerbin, meaning that as you punch your way through the atmosphere, you are getting a lot more drag and a lot more heating effects. Heating effects that the Firefly mod turns into beautiful animations. And as we go down, we can gather some science from the atmosphere. Yes, that was the struct again that blew off. And I really have to figure out how to stop this camera shaking, because I'm not too happy about it. But here we are streaking along the atmosphere as we go. And this is where I start to realize that we may actually land in the ocean. And I will start applying something that Apollo did and also the Soyuz is doing, which is shifting the center of mass of your spacecraft. And as you do that, you create a kind of a windshield in which you can leverage the angle of your heat shield to land a little bit further or a little bit closer. But we're trying to go a little bit further. Here we go. I'm angling the descent, but not too much because I don't want my wheels to blow off. And so this only barely went. You can hear me break through the sound barrier, and the wheels are going crazy. Yeah, so the wheels are also turning when I'm making an angle. And you can see me trying to skip, use a little bit of the onboard propellant. We have so much propellant left, which, as you will see later on, was a fortunate thing. But here I am trying to skip and get to the fixed surface of the poles. But the air is just too thick. There's only so much you can do to change your trajectory on Eve. Once it is decided that you are going to land, you are going to land. Which is what's happening around. Unfortunately, the sun is setting, so it's really dark. Even with the lights on, I had no idea where I was going to. And I did notice that the engines made no difference at all. And so I decided just, well, run with it and see where we end up. We're deploying the parachutes. Eve has a thick atmosphere, so why using the engines? I'm testing the system. Here we are landing in the water, which is bad. And I thought the mission was lost until we waited for sunrise. Because as we woke up from sunrise, I noticed that the shore was not that far away. And we have all this fuel left, so maybe we can turn this rover / spacecraft into a boat. And yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to point towards the shore using Smart AS, which again took me way too long to figure out how to actually use this. But in the end it worked. We're pointing, and then we're going to use short bursts of the engines. And we can actually get up to speed quite easily. Now the higher the speed, the bigger the drag, so I'm using small birds because I'm not sure if I will make it there with enough fuel. So small birds, drag, small birds, and it took a long time to get there. But here we are, very close to the shore. This is the final bit we need to do, and we're already noticing interesting stuff on our cameras. We see objects and features below the surface that we can't really figure out what it is. As for the on the surface, we also see some interesting round thingies that are up there. Here we are, washing up on the shores. That is definitely not a natural rock formation. This looks organic. Have we discovered life? It's time to figure out. So, having washed up on the shore, it's time to deploy the rover and hope that the wheels will touch the ground, which one of them did. And after a couple of reloads, I managed to get her onto semi-solid ground. And the rover is looking at the water. It's of the Explodium Sea. It's looking at these weird bubbles, which seem to be made of some kind of gas that is evaporating from what appears to be plant life on the planet of Eve. Yes, we may have discovered life on a different planet. And what does this mean for Kerbal, for life that might be out there in the solar system? About our science. Should we go here? What would happen if we would disturb these life forms? Or should we go there and see what it means? Is this life comparable to what we have found on Kerbin? Questions. But our little rover is struggling in the sunlight, and I did a brief calculation. It's going to take a month or something like that to get back into more sunlight, so I figured let's go with what we've got. We've got enough sunlight to power the batteries and a little light. So in the darkness we stroll around, and the people at KSP are wondering, what does it mean? And then they lost contact with the rover.